Let me share my screen. Hi, everybody. You can do me a favor. My name is Alex. I am friends with Pepe Lopez. We go way back to our days at Slalom. If you can do me a favor and drop in chat, where are you coming from these days? I am coming to you from Chicago. And if you know Chicago, I'll just say specifically Oak Park. And to confirm, you can see my screen okay. Philadelphia, New Hampshire Seacoast, Massachusetts, the whole state, Quincy, Bellingham, Rhode Island. Hey, can I tell you a quick Rhode Island story? So my wife was in the Navy and she was stationed on a tiny, tiny island just off the coast of Madagascar, south of India, called Diego Garcia. It's an British Isle, and there was a Navy base there. And my wife is a journalist, and she was stationed there with this other woman who she's still friends with to this day. And we recently, this woman and her husband recently relocated to Chicago, and we had a barbecue with them a couple months ago. And this family has lived all over the world. They've been stationed in London, and Singapore, and Hawaii, and Rhode Island, and Washington, and New Zealand. And so I asked these girls who were teenagers, I said, so of all the places that you guys have lived, where did you enjoy the most? And they said, oh, Rhode Island was the best place we lived at. And I said, really? And they told us all about Rhode Island, about how wonderful it was. So kudos to Rhode Island. I don't know if you have anything to say to that, but I just thought it was a nice admission from some, these kids were raised in California. So there you go. Well, my name is Alex Yates, and I didn't know anything about neuroscience until I interviewed at a company 10 years ago, and they had just come from a conference. They said, hey, have you heard anything about this neuroscience? And I said, no, what is it? And he goes, yeah, this guy has this whole domain, and it, like, your brain is focused on these 5 domains of threats and response, and it can really kind of give you precision about how you respond to changes. I was like, really? And that lit a fire under me because I come from a land of social science. I was a communications major. And so I studied a lot of rhetoric and organizational communication and business messaging. And the thing that drove me absolutely crazy was things like Seven Highly Habits is like the most popular business book that everybody knows about. Very few people have read. And if you read the 7 Habits, you're like, okay, these are the 7 things I absolutely need to do. And a couple years later, they came out with the 8th habit, which made me just realize, like, okay, so we're just making stuff up. It's kind of like if you saw the movie Something About Mary, where Ben Stiller picks up a hitchhiker. He goes, hey, you know that the infomercial for 8-minute abs? I have an idea called 7-minute abs. And so now it's just 7 highly habits is just like 8-minute abs. It's like, it could be 8 minutes, it could be 7, it could be 7 habits, it could be 8. And that sort of thing showed me, like, all right, so I guess it just depends on what day of the week it is. We're no better than horoscopes. And from a social science perspective, that was just always frustrating to me. And neuroscience finally gave me the scientific backing to do what I love to do, which is to help persuade people. I had a previous background in marketing and went into leadership development with Humana, did some coaching there to try to boost NPS scores, and then found my way to change management at Kraft Foods, and that found its way into consulting where I am today. So in any case, that was sort of the root of neuroscience, and I want to light that fire for you because it was a great gift that I got, and it really made me rethink all the things that I thought I knew with regards to how I show up at work and do my job. So let's get into it. So today we are going to set the table, and I need to know, are you ready to party? So if you guys can give me some sort of sign that you guys are out there, any sort of emotion, reaction, emojis, chat. Are you guys ready to party? There. Oh, we got rocket chips. I did not know we did rocket chips. That is a new emoji for me. I'm not on Zoom a lot, so rocket chips are nice. Okay, we're going to change the conversation. And when I say change, a sort of, that's going to be for tonight's conversation interchangeable with Agile. This is sort of goes along with an Agile change methodology. And for 10 years at Slalom, I was the product owner of our Change Agility Certificate. So I had certified 600 people to get this. And I'm a big believer in Agile and change. I think it is a driver of innovation. And Maggie and I were talking earlier, where there might be some waning of interest in businesses. They're always trendy. They're always like consolidating and, centralizing and decentralizing, and for them to move away from agile is kind of silly because agile is the engine of innovation in my mind. So here's the agenda for today. Well, let me ask you this. Put in the chat. Is your preference surprise parties or dinner parties? Let me know. You like surprise parties or dinner parties? I see dinner parties, dinner parties, dinner parties. Ooh, with a surprise dessert. Oh, that's nice. Dinner parties, dinner parties, dinner surprise parties. Ooh, Alyssa's a surprise party person. Alyssa, do you like having the surprise party thrown for you, or do you like throwing the surprise parties?
Oh, I'm fine with either. I just think of dinner parties as more of a stuffy formal event, and
A little foo-foo?
yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, I have something to share with you. So let's talk about that for a second. We're going to hear from Derek. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear from me.
Dude, how are you the last one to show up to your own party? That is messed up. What party? Your birthday party. What are you talking about?
What are you doing?
What?
It's a surprise party.
Surprise party?
Are you drunk?
Of course I am. It's a party.
You guys can come out. Derek messed this up. Seriously.
I was wondering where all the cars were.
How stupid can you be?
Mom, why didn't you
Oh
just
my
say
God,
it's a
man,
surprise
I'm sorry.
party?
There's people here to see you. Happy birthday. Thanks a lot, Derek.
Oh, happy birthday. I'm sorry.
Thanks a lot, Derek. So that's a surprise party in action. So as we go through this, change or agile is really about reducing the surprise parties in work and life. And we have surprise parties all the time at work. Surprise, your boss has changed. Surprise, your team has been transformed. Surprise, you have to use this new tool. Surprise, this process is no longer valid. Surprise, regulators want you to do it this way. Reorg, whatever it is. And it freaks people out. And you'll notice at the surprise party, the guy who was having a surprise party, he was in, flip-flops and shorts and a t-shirt. Probably not the outfit he would have wanted to wear when he was going to hang out with his friends. There were probably people at the party that he wished weren't there. And there were probably people that he wished would have been there. And it's probably not the ideal setting because we like to prepare for things. We love anticipation. REI has done some research that said people get more satisfaction or equal to satisfaction planning their vacation as they do taking their vacation. So that anticipation is really, really key. My dad was big into surprises, and I remember I have an older brother, so I got hand-me-downs all the time. And one day my dad said, "Put on your shoes, we're going to run an errand." I'm like, "Oh, great." And he takes me to a bike shop and he's like, "Pick one out." I was like, "Whoa, I haven't had a new bike ever." And I was in 8th grade. And I was like really shocked. And I was like, "Oh, I think the red one." He's like, "We don't seem very excited." Like, well, I'm in shock. And I thought about that lesson about I wish I could have given him that Disney kid, like, "Gee, Dad, this is great. I'm so excited." But literally I was like too stunned to know how to respond. And so often, if you don't have a priming, if you don't do priming, then you're not going to get the reaction that you want. So I actually did the opposite when I proposed to my wife. I gave her a poem a week in advance so that way she can go get her nails done. She can go buy herself a dress. She can get all excited in anticipation. And then I got the exact reaction that I wanted. So when I popped the question, it was a slam dunk. So in any case, think about the dinner party that you have. Dinner parties is not just about, doing the activities, doing agile or doing comms and training. It's about the engagement. It's about who am I going to break bread with? Do I want to sit next to these people? Do I want to go in the first place? Does Alyssa want to go? Because she's like, "Oh, is Maggie going to be there? I don't know if I want to go. Maggie's going to be. Oh, Gary's going to be there. Oh, I want to go. Gary's going to be there." So people have different anticipations, thinking like, was there a theme? Are we drinking? Are there kids? Are we playing games? Is the game going to be on? Whatever it is, we have all kinds of questions to know the who, what, where, when, why of an event. And so events are about making sure that people want to be there. The cooking and eating is like almost secondary. I can tell you some great dinner parties I've gone to, and I could not even tell you what I ate. It didn't really matter. But I can tell you the conversations I had. I can tell you some of the faux pas that were said, the off-color jokes that I probably shouldn't have said. But what we ate, the comms and training doesn't matter, but people remember the feeling that they have by going through that experience. And that's what we want to have, is a feeling that people feel safe enough to want to go there and want to stay. And not only will they want to go, but do they want to come back? There's always a sign that people might go to your first party, but are they going to come to your second party? So we need to change the conversation about how we talk about change, or in this case, agile. How do you make sure that you're not just minimizing threats, but you're maximizing meaning? How are you less about reducing risk? Everyone's always about risk. That's great. But people are curious about opportunity. How do you create that opportunity? And finally, how are you less about fear and more about hope? You know, we want to avoid fear as much as possible, but really hope is something that we really aspire to. The one thing about our language is that it's overwhelmingly negative by design, because it's kind of funny that like a really good compliment is like, hey, you look nice. You're like, thanks. And that goes out really well. Ooh, how was that? How was the wedding? Ooh, the wedding was nice. Pretty bland word. But if you said like, oh, it was a disaster. Ooh, what kind of disaster? Oh my God, it was chaotic. It was this. Like, we get very precise language on what's negative, because negative is a threat. Because if you go back in time, it was like, oh, this tastes bad. What do you mean bad? Does he mean sour, like you don't like it? Or it tastes like poison and bitter? Like, oh, if this tastes good, great, I'll eat it. So our language by design has evolved to be overwhelmingly negative, like 2/3 negative. I think if you do an inventory of our adjectives, there's like 178 in the English language, and almost 100 of them are negative. And so trying to get people to think positively and think hopefully is a challenge, because our language doesn't really support that. So change has never been this fast and will never be this slow again. Change is going to keep accelerating. AI will make sure of that. As we are more connected than ever, things will continue to not feel slow. But we crave information of what's around the corner. We always want leaders to tell us what the future is, but anybody who can tell you what the future is actually considered a crazy person. And we want our leaders to be a little bit crazy. And America had an election, and we're there. But when faced with uncertainty, we see anything as looks like a threat. And so when you have an agenda, or you schedule a meeting with someone, ever have your boss or someone of consequence schedule a meeting, but they have no agenda, and you're like, oh my God, what could it be? We always think negatively. So how do we provide that clarity and structure and support to do that? So we want to do that, but people say that all the time. And my question is, how do you actually engage people? As an agile scrum master or leading any sort of change, how do you actually do that? Because change really shatters our sense of security, which in turn derails our productivity. Any sort of transformation you go to, you're not just dealing with the trauma from this change, because maybe the change that you're doing isn't that big. You're rolling out a simple system. But the trauma of every transformation that person that's ever gone through is going to come to bear. It's like when you're dating. When you're dating somebody, you're not just dealing with how they are today. You have all the baggage of their past relationships they're comparing yourself to. Is this person worthwhile? Is this person trustworthy? Are they fun? Are they broke? Does this person have warrants? What are all the things about that person that they bring to that table as they question and evaluate the things you're trying to tell them? And you might be trying to say, look, I just want to have a cup of coffee, but they're going through their checklist of all the past traumas to wonder, is this something I want to do? Do I want to break bread with you? Because change puts holes in people. And so past changes or any past trauma is going to question our value, question whether we belong, and question the safety and security of this relationship, of what you're asking us to do, to take a leap. So we need to foster psychological safety to make sure that people are made whole. Because there's a cost to change. If you don't change, you will pay the price. There's definitely a bottom line impact. Gallup has actually proven this. There is thousands of dollars of productivity when people are engaged. When people are leaning in and doing their best work, there's a dollar amount to that productivity. The problem is 51% of the people are not engaged. They're sort of checked out. They're hanging out, they're having coffee, they're attending meetings. They're like, okay, nothing for me. I'm good, wrapping up, contributing very little to the organization to actually drive the change, bare minimum. And then there's 70% of people who they're not engaged, they're not engaged, they are actively working against you. They are looking to undermine the things because they are quo mongers. They are fighting for that status quo. They want to make sure things stay the same because then they don't have to change and nobody else has to. And so they will do everything they can to unravel any sort of progress that the engaged people are making. So when you have engaged folks, you're more profitable, productive, and customer focused. And when you are not engaged, you will have all kinds of issues with your investment that you made. Basically, every transformation is a bet by a leader. I'm going to bet this much budget that we can get this much lift. If we spend $5 million, we should get $50 million of lift down the road. And then the disengaged people are like, not happening on my watch. And they will do everything they can to unravel it. So you need to decrease the disengaged amount as low as possible. You'll probably never get to zero, but if you at least move them over to the non-engaged and hopefully get into the engaged category, the financial impact is going to be huge. And what drives people to change? It ain't business drivers. Every business driver is about growth, innovation, connection, sustainability. All of our business drivers are about some, efficiency, innovation, collaboration, something like that. Nobody's showing up for work for that. That's great. That's a byproduct for the organization. Good for you. What's in it for me? I want to know, is this something that's worth doing? Is this meaningful to me? Is this good for me? Is this good for my career? Where am I in the pecking order on this? Do I have control over this? What's the future mean for this? Is this fair? All these questions are going through our mind, and emotions defeat logic every single time. Emotions defeat logic every single time. So it's a reason why trying to argue with someone on social media doesn't work. Laying out your facts. People don't win debates. They win with emotions, and emotions are told with stories. And so you need to figure out what is the story that the person needs to tell themselves to get on board with what it is you're doing. So how do we work with that hardwiring of our biology? So I went a little crazy with GIFs here just because with work, I don't get to do GIFs too often. So I had way too much fun. But we're going to talk about brains, and not in the zombie way, but how can we feel like whenever something bad happens, you feel like you got kicked in the gut? When I got the notice a year ago that I was getting laid off, I literally felt physically ill. Like you could track it on my Fitbit, showing that I did not feel well. It really was like this physical feeling of pain. And there's a reason for that, is that your brain has not evolved. Your brain has lagged behind societal changes. Society has moved very quickly since we've gone from farms to cities, airplanes, cars, trains, rocket ships, drones. Things are moving very quickly. And now our society we're meeting on Zoom camera. We are from all different parts of different cities, and we are still trying to engage in communication. And our brain is still running on the same circuits. So right now, social pain runs on the same circuits as physical pain, which is why you feel that way. So if you ever feel rejected, if you ever feel like, oh my God, all my friends are in Vegas, they didn't invite me. Like your feeling of like survival feels very, very threatened when you see basic things like that. So neuroscience sort of helps us shortcut that. We can't accelerate evolution, but we can have a framework to figure that out. Our brains aren't broken. It's just doing what we've evolved to do. And our brain is a very sophisticated system that is essentially running on Windows 95. If you remember Clippy was a long time ago, but this was the kickoff event with Bill Gates and the white boys rocking out. So neuroscience can help our brains adapt like a system update. So let's get that patchwork of what a system update would be with neuroscience to this framework that I pulled together. Now, before we get in there, I do know something about brains, and that your brains crave social interaction after 20 minutes. It's a reason that TED Talks are capped at 18 minutes, because at the 20-minute mark, you're checking your email, you're checking your phone, you're looking at other things like, yeah, this is great, but my brain is kind of distracted a little bit. So let's undistract your brain and let's engage with each other. Come off mute, and I would like to ask, what are you doing to bring more precision or more science to your work in Agile? And Maggie, you came off camera, so I'm going to ask you first.
Ah, that's unfair. I don't know. I have to think about that. Well, learning, reading about not as much hands-on I'd like about AI and trying to figure out how I'm gonna, what tools might be applicable. That's
Okay,
doing the research. Yeah.
cool. Who else?
So how would you define bringing more science and what's the scope of what counts as science?
I'm going to let Darlene answer. She looks eager to say
Yeah,
something.
no, I have so many. I don't feel confident about my answer, but I'm thinking there could be a lot of answers. And I'm thinking
There are
about,
lots of answers, and there's no right
right.
answer.
So I'm thinking the surveys. So you asked me how I'm
Sure.
doing. So we're doing some surveys about how teams have we're surveys with numbers, and also they can type in additional information. So that is a way that we're putting numbers on.
Oh.
You can be precise about how well an engagement has gone so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And piggybacking on that, run experiments, inspect and adapt. Like, yeah, how do you know, like, how can you generate data? And so you think about, I always love the example where someone says, think about that. And thank you so much, Darlene. Great answer. And we're going to get one more answer before we move on. They always say, like, how many pieces of data have you generated since you woke up? So you think about, like, if you look at your data on your phone, what is it that you've looked at? What's the data that you've done? Like, look at your Fitbit. How much exercise have you done? How many calories have you consumed? How much caffeine have you consumed? How much energy have you consumed? Turn on your TV, keeping lights on. Like, there's lots of different data points if you want to think about it for you to plug in and develop lead and lag measures. If you want to look at productivity, efficiency, just the cost of being you, there's lots of different ways you can do it. And so thinking about how can you bring more science to the conversation. Anybody else? One more. We need one more answer.
I know in mine we use a lot of Jira data. So I
Okay.
run lot of filters, have dashboards, showing trends for how the team is doing, and use that to kind of help drive future decisions and see where we need to inspect and adapt.
Yeah. Yeah, we're looking for things that are opposite of gut calls. Well, my gut says that people are working on their progress. They're making progress on their project. Really? Well, the Jira could tell me specifically, precisely, exactly how much progress we're making. And I could tell you, is it a little progress or a lot of progress? Okay. Thank you very much for all your participation. Thanks, Alyssa. Okay. So neuroscience shows us that people are most engaged when psychological safety is cultivated around the following key terms. I can tell you that I have benefited the most from COVID because talking about psychological safety before COVID seemed like super artsy-fartsy, free to be you and me, group hugs, trust falls. Like, nobody wants to hear about psychological safety. But COVID changed that conversation abruptly and to my benefit because I've been talking about this since 2017. And now I had people willing to listen and wanting to know, how do I do that? And so we do it like this. Think about these 5 questions. Do we feel part of something bigger than ourselves? It's one reason that we're here. We want to feel connected. We want to feel like we belong to something bigger than just doing things in isolation. There's a value in this community that's immeasurable. Think about the end of It's a Wonderful Life with George Bailey. Like, yeah, he makes some money, but it really is like the way he makes his money. We really rather be George Bailey than Potter, right? We don't want to be Potter. Nobody wants to be Potter. Do we feel elevated status when we can share what we know? Nothing's better than like, hey, tell me more about that. Like, that's really interesting. That you seem to know a lot about that. When people seem to want to know our expertise, that makes us feel, lights us up like a Christmas tree. When we have a degree of control to be effective, one way to give people control is to get them to make decisions, even small decisions like, hey, when should we take a break? Where should we get coffee? What should we have for lunch? Who should be invited to this call? When should we have the meeting? Helping people make simple decisions, and you can scale those to be more complex and more consequential. But even starting with allowing people to make any sort of decision is a big deal. It's the same as asking my kids, what do you want to have for dinner? You know, they feel like they have more control, even though the choices are not ideal. Do you want asparagus or broccoli? It's still vegetable. They got to choose. And also, do we feel expectations are clear for the future? And finally, do we feel that work is fairly acknowledged and then information is evenly shared? I'd say that's a huge trigger with companies. Decision made in the dark triggers people in the biggest way. Like, when was that decided? Who was there? Why wasn't I included? We all freak out about that one. We want to make sure that opportunities are equitably shared. I can go back to a job I had working at the mall, and even simple task of who was assigned to take out the trash. You can see the pattern of bias based on, you know, we had a manager who was always asking our Black associate to go take out the trash. And we're like, man, why do you always ask her? Like, I'll do it. I'll take out the trash. Why don't we have a schedule of rotation? Like, we realized we need a more equitable thing because we could see the bias in the manager, and we passively called him out on it. And so he's like, oh yeah, you're right. Because he realized he didn't want to get busted for it and have his whole staff turn against him. But people notice that. The question is, do we want to acknowledge it? So here's the framework. This is the payoff. Make peace with change. It's based on neuroscience that identifies 5 key domains that light up your brain with regard to psychological safety. And by understanding each of these, you can foster that environment for employees to feel supported during times of change. I always tell people within 5 questions, I could be 80% confident what your drivers are. I don't say business drivers. I don't say biological drivers. I just say drivers to know exactly, are you on board? Are you off board? And by knowing these questions, I can figure out exactly what it's going to take to move the needle with you. And I can tell you, you cannot assume that you'll know what it is. Because I made that mistake 10 years ago when we were doing this huge initiative and we were changing lending at a bank and everybody had to do it. And so we're taking away control. We were automating the third of people's roles. And we're in Chicago, and there was this division that had got acquired a few years ago up in Wisconsin. And the leader of the Wisconsin group was holding everyone back. No one from Wisconsin wanted to get on board. And I think her name was Melissa. I said, hey, Melissa, I said, okay, obviously sense of purpose. This is tied to the vision and strategy. She's like, yeah. I said, everyone feels like this is going to be better for the roles because it's more automated. So it's going to make them, more valuable in the company. She's like, yeah. And obviously control is obviously something that you have a hang up, I'm guessing, because, we're taking away control of your job. And she's like, no, that's not it. I'm fine with that. I said, really? I said, well, certainty. I said, do you feel like, things are certain? She goes, no, you've laid out a roadmap. It's pretty clear. I said, well, fairness, like everyone's doing this. So you probably agree that this is fair then, right? So I'm thinking I'm in the clear. Like, she's agreed to everything. She goes, no, that's just it. This isn't fair. You shouldn't be asking us to make this change at all. Why are we having to do this change now? Why are you having us do it? We shouldn't be making this change. This isn't fair. I'm like, really? And I had to backpedal and recalibrate. And once we communicated a message of like, everyone's doing this, this is something that we're all going to do, and here's why, and we had to provide lots of points around the fairness thing, she flipped, and then everyone in the Wisconsin region flipped, and then it should move forward. But for about 6 weeks, we were dead in the water because we could not get that team on board, and we could not figure out what it was. And so neuroscience was new. I said, I think I got it. Let me see if I can try it. And I did a stakeholder assessment with those 5 questions and was able to isolate that issue. I made the assumption I was wrong. Luckily, she was forthcoming and shared what it was because she trusted me, because we had built that over time. And I knew exactly what it was, and we got things moving again. And the leader was like, I can't believe you got her to move forward, because she was a giant pain. I told the boss, the head of strategy, I said, you need to bring her on your team. And ultimately, within a year, he did, and things got so much better at that company. So change is not rocket science. It's just neuroscience. So here's what it looks like. If you look at the content, I provided some context and also some conversation starters. So how can you actually make this actionable? This is a pretty great slide of, well, the things I shared on the previous slide are the top line, but the stuff that's new here is the context. How do you unite people around a shared goal? And by the way, it's not about passion. I don't care what your passion is, but it's about our shared purpose. Why are we here as a group? I'm just going to look at names on the screen. Varuna might be here for one reason, Glenn's here for another reason. I don't totally care what those reasons are, but do we have a collective reason that we're all here? And focusing on that is really important. And so thinking about how you can unify people to have those shared goals is really key. Shared purpose is the key. How can you offer people more status? Nothing's worse than like, you know, something new coming into your circle, like me, like, why are we asking this guy? You know, maybe Jerome's like, I know stuff about neuroscience. Nobody asked me. Why are you bringing in this outsider guy from Chicago? Like, that's not cool. Like, I feel, you know, like you don't value me as much. My pecking order status goes down. Sense of control, how others choose how things are done or decided. And so when we feel like things are done for us or to us, we feel really threatened. And that's a problem. A lot of leaders, they see this change as an opportunity, disruption as a reward. Yeah, if you get to make the choice. You know, if you're choosing to make an initiative, it's like, oh, we're going to do this the first of the year. No, no, no. Can we do it in March? Because the first of the year, we're still cleaning up from last year's mess. Like, how can you help people feel like they have some say in when that disruption is? How can we provide others with information about the future? Here's a key thing that I learned during COVID. Well, I put into action during COVID. When you don't have certainty of information, and when COVID first started, we didn't know how this was going to work. We're all working from home. How are we going to meet? Like, how are we going to work with clients who we used to be on site and now we're not? Like, all these things. So we said every day at 8:30, we're going to have a stand-up. Join the stand-up, and we're going to have that. Those soon moved to 3 times a week, and then it moved to 1 time a week. And we said every day or whenever we have this meeting, we're going to meet at this time and we're going to have an update. And even if there's no update, we can kind of just come together socially, but just know this is when any announcements are going to be made will be made at this call. And that calmed everybody down. So when you don't have certainty of information, give people certainty of process. When you don't have certainty of information, give people certainty of process. And the last one is, how can you show that a task we ask of one person is on par with what we ask of others to do? People are hypersensitive to equality. You know, they sense of like, you know, as kids too, you cut the piece of cake and the other person gets to choose. You'll see like scientific calibrations come out to figure out how fair that is. So that's the content, the context, and the conversation starters. I'll pause for a second here to see if there's any questions or conversation you guys want to have.
I love that. I love that when you don't have certainty of information, give people certainty of process. And yeah, I do that. I do that in my personal life too. So many times people want the answers. Why did this happen? Why did this happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And you don't know, right? So it's just like, I don't know, but I can tell you that by next week, this, something concrete,
Right.
yeah.
Well, it's even something basic. Like it took my wife a long time for her to like play ball with me on, hey, text me when you're leaving downtown. So my wife, we both work at home, but one day a week she works downtown. So she's downtown today. And I always say, text when you're on the road. Because then we can sort of gauge like, okay, I'll be home in about 30 to 45 minutes and we can have dinner ready. And, and for the most part, she does. And then some days she forgets and then she just walks in the door. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't hear from you. So I didn't start dinner because I don't want to have dinner ready until you walk in. So, oh, so dinner's not ready? I'm like, no, because you didn't text me. So like, giving people that certainty, setting expectations of that. And it can be something as simple as when I send out messages, I will say something like with the survey, I'll say, I will continue sending out reminders until we get a critical mass of responses. Or I will send a follow-up message. I would like to hear from you by Thursday. If I don't hear from you, I will follow up on Friday. Or I would like you to, complete this by Friday. If I don't hear from you Friday, look for an email from me on Monday. Let people know the sequence of what you're thinking. So that way they're not when they're playing hide and seek, that way when you actually find them and say, hey, it's Monday, I'd asked for this on Friday. How's it going? Is there anything I can do? They usually play this mea culpa of, you know what? You're right. You totally were fair. You said Friday. It is now Monday. I'll get on that. And I usually get high compliance when I tell people the range of change. And a range of change is really helpful because it shows that you are being empathetic, but it's also very certain about what it is you need. Because then I I need to turn around and I need to synthesize and summarize this information and get it to leaders by Tuesday morning. So I need it by noon on Monday if I'm going to have the afternoon to be able to pull this together. And like, okay, yeah. You know, from a fairness standpoint, people don't want to make things unfair for you, and they'll realize that they are the ones who did that. So here's what some deliverables look like. Again, this is change oriented, but you know, purpose could be a case for change. And I would say one thing that's been huge for me is to take a one pager where you have the who, what, where, when, why, and how of what's happening. And then I take each of those boxes of who, what, where, when, why, and how, and I do a drill down roadshow deck where the roadshow deck has why, what, how, who, when, where to get resources. And it basically is like 7 slides of a roadshow deck that's a double click down of the one pager. And then once you have your roadshow deck, you can convert that into like a 60-second video. It's something that could be as simple as images on a screen with words and music, no more than 60 seconds, but the same thing. So then when you are sharing resources, say, look at the one pager, look at the roadshow deck, look at the video. It's all the same information, but it's that Geico commercial of 15 minutes will save you 50% on your auto insurance. You know, we've heard that same message for, I don't know, 20 years, and we've just heard it with different context. And so have the same content, just rotate your context so people can digest it in the way that they're familiar with, whether it's a roadshow deck or a video or just a one pager. Figure out that change journey map, future workshop, a whole range of everything. I'm not going to drain the slide, but you can kind of get a sense of the different ways that you can deliver on this change and how do you bring this to your job and make this actionable. So it's not just this, oh, that neuroscience thing is cool, but this is actually how it works at work. There's a lot of neuroscience models that just focus on interpersonal relationships. This can be used for both. How can you apply the interpersonal of peace to the organizational of your work? So here's peace in action. I actually do monthly pulse checks with the operations team. And so there were some people who were transferred from one organization to another, and people were freaking out. And, you know, we did a lot of work early on to kind of infuse people with a strong sense of purpose. And when we did the survey about 2 months in to this initiative, the survey feedback came like this. Overall, how are things going? This is on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is low and 5 is high. And people are like, 3.38. How do you feel that you are working with a shared sense of purpose? 3.65 was our highest score. I was super proud of that. I was like, okay, we are doing our job. The thing that was the lowest was, do you feel like you have enough information about what's ahead? 2.56. That's because a third of their division had been laid off. And they were a third. There was a third that was retained, and there was a third that was them, and they were transferred. So they were in freak out mode, thinking that they were the next ones to get laid off. And it wasn't until 2 months later that I kept showing this data to the global VP. I said, you need to tell them that they're not going to get laid off. It's like, well, nobody can promise that nobody's going to get laid off. I'm like, you're killing me. Like, I need you to tell them that we are not making changes. You need them through the rest of the year. Like, there are no planned layoffs. He finally said that, and the score shot way up. But once we knew that, we knew where our people's heads out with the freak out phase. And, you know, we can then attend to it from there. But we actually used AI to do sentiment analysis, and we did a survey. We took the survey, we ran it through our AI playground that we have at our work, and it kind of just gave us a summary of all that. The lowest dimension is certainty. The low average rating indicates employees feel there are significant gaps in having enough information about plans for the future. There appears to be a sentiment of uncertainty, a lack of transparency about what lies ahead. I'm like, great, let's do that. So we took this and we said, okay, now we ran it through AI again. Take this summary and put it into a mitigation plan. And AI did this for us. Oops. Certainty. Provide transparency into the future. Plans with a roadmap for people and resource. Host a forum to explain what's in it for me to each team. Explain the purpose and intent of the discovery process mapping sessions. Summarize change impacts by team and the timing of each change rollout. Like, it gave us 2 to 3 bullet points for each of these. We put these into a project plan, and suddenly we were off and running, and Peace was able to calm the waters, drive engagement, boost productivity, and stop people from freaking out and having traumatic experience, and actually gain them into that positive reward state to be more productive. And we went from doing these monthly and now we do them quarterly. And so right now things have been a little rough, and it's funny, the operational leaders, they don't want to do a survey because they don't want to see what those results might be. But the data point is there. So here's the science behind it. Actually, you know what? I'm going to punt on this slide because I did something specific for the script that we'll get to in just a minute. So you may have heard of other neuroscience models, and one that's really popular is the SCARF model. And SCARF is kind of like how ProSci is for change management. ProSci is, they have their own ADKAR model, and ProSci and ADKAR are really great. But keep in mind, ProSci is a consulting shop run out of Colorado. And Tim Carisi is a really cool guy. I met him this year. I think the ADKAR model is fine. It does great to explain change for project managers. I don't feel that it does much to drive behavior change. And to me, like, the neuroscience really helps with what are the behaviors that people are feeling that need to change. And I think there's some gaps there that I think you need to keep innovating to do that. And I think the SCARF model is same. I think when I first heard about it 10 years ago, I thought it was fantastic. But I did think it was lacking with lack of purpose. And so there's some other models that are out there. There's a woman in the UK named Hilary Scarlett. She's got an excellent book called The Neuroscience of Organizational Change. And of all the neuroscience books out there, I would say that that's probably my favorite. Hilary Scarlett, The Neuroscience of Organizational Change. Go look at YouTube and see some cool Hilary Scarlett videos as she gives some little snippets of neuroscience. I've gone to New York to the Neuro Leadership Summit run by David Rock, met him, did the whole neuro leadership certificate. Thought that stuff was great in terms of more precision in science. But again, I think the SCARF model, it plays defense against threats. It doesn't really have much offense for growth. Spaces is good. It has a lot to say. It tries to say, I think, a lot. I think it's hard to comprehend and put it into practice a little bit. As much as I like Hilary Scarlett and how she explains things, I think Peace hits home runs. I think there's a little bit more precision with Peace. There's another group of people who left the Neuro Leadership Institute in New York, working with David Rock. They started their own practice called like the Brain Network or Brain Activation Group, or I forget what it's called. But they came up with a model called Safety. Again, like Spaces, it's a lot to digest. It's also just about keeping you safe and just focusing on safety and protection. But I don't think it really does a lot for helping you soar and grow and think about not just risk, but opportunity. So Peace is not just about individual needs. As I said before, it's about organizational needs. Because Peace wasn't the first brain science. It's the latest. It's not the first. And so think about, evolution. This is an evolution that I felt a need after doing a bunch of research. I just felt like everything's missing mark. And so I felt like everything was good, but it didn't feel complete. And so I was talking with a very smart guy in my office, who's this great learning researcher guy. And we kind of pulled this model together. I pulled this model together, and then he tried to punch holes in it, and we rounded it out until it was airtight. And the Peace model is something that I feel is pretty good because it helps people change, not just when they feel the heat, but helping them see the light. And I think by having purpose in there, it helps add that sense of light for people to look forward to. Now, specific to this group, I prepared this for tonight. This is about the Peace model at work. If you want to know what the specific neuroscience is, what that means, how that looks in humans, and then what is the Agile impacts, this is a breakdown for you. So purpose gives you that dopamine response. Ego gives you that serotonin and oxytocin. Autonomy is a stress hormone reduction. Certainty is your amygdala regulation, that is freak out. And equality is your mirror neuron. You know what would be really cool in a few years if we all got EEG caps to wear? And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if like Jeff Bezos has his workers, he already has his warehouse workers wearing digital bracelets to test their motions to see who's the most productive. I wouldn't be surprised if companies, really invade privacy and, okay, we're having a webinar, everybody put on your EEG cap to make sure that you're following along, because then you can see if people are following along, the brain activity pattern should light up more or less the same. And so there's research that shows that mirror neuron activity. So as information workers, are we going to be treated the way blue collar workers have been treated with sensors for years? Are brain sensors far behind? Ethically speaking, it's very easy to say no right now, but we are seeing violations of people at the workplace going in a big tire. Yeah, that's when you retire. But yeah, it could not be far off. And I would not want that to see it, but everyone would be like, oh, it'd be so fascinating to know, like, how did people react to my speech? Like, leaders are so egotistical, they're missing the point of people freaking out, like, oh my God, if my mind wanders and I'm thinking about something else, they're going to wonder, what was that guy thinking about when I said that? Okay, so here's a great breakdown for you about how can you bring that to your team to bring more stability, stronger collaboration, clearer thinking, stronger team bonds, and just have focus, people motivated as you're going through sprints. And finally, life at peace. This is what life could be with and without the peace model. And so if you're looking for that steady Eddie response of psychological safety, clear purpose and direction, empowered teams, high engagement, consistent delivery, the peace model can really bring all those feel-good chemical cocktails to you versus the high stress levels, poor communication, resistance, low engagement, and inconsistent delivery. People just resisting, leaning out, and the volatility, it will just really derail any sort of productivity that you are trying to drive. So again, going back to the dinner party, you think about when you are looking to have a stand-up, are you treating it like a dinner party? Do people want to go to your stand-ups? Do people feel like they have purpose? Do your stand-ups or any agile ceremonies feel like they are acknowledging people so that way they feel like their contributions are valued for their ego? Do they have some sense of control? What decisions can you allow them to make them feel that control? Is there certainty of there's an agenda, there's a wrap-up, there's next steps, people are making progress? And finally, is there fairness in it, or is it very biased and you can see who's playing favorites? Think about your agile and make it like a dinner party and less like a surprise party, unless you're listening. That's all I got. So that is my wrap up, and I welcome any questions.
All right, I got a question. Oh, and all right, I think I beat you, Peppy. So, how do we identify organizations and groups that have made peace with change? I want to, if I'm looking for my next team, we got some sort of rating system out there. Or how do we get how do we get peace certified?
What you mean to rate an organization? Are they peace friendly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everything's on a continuum, right? It's kind of like, am I a nice person? Yeah, but maybe I'm driving in traffic and someone's driving on the shoulder and I feel that that's not fair. And then I lose my mind and suddenly I don't look like such a great guy. I look like a total jerk as I'm like swearing at the guy as he's doing that thing. So, people scan for threats 6 times a minute. So you are constantly looking at like every little thing that's uttered, like, is that helping me or hurting me? Helping me or hurting me? And so we are constantly looking at that. So it's sort of like Maslow's hierarchy. You're never all the way up or all the way down. It's like a heart, you're vacillating between it. So any organization can say they have purpose and then they have a bad quarter and then suddenly like, oh, we don't have purpose anymore. We are prioritizing certainty and all the thing. Think about DEI. DEI was great. And George Floyd welcomed and expanded DEI. Fantastic. And then suddenly the backlash happened, right? As every continuum swings. And there's a guy out there who's very aggressively trying to embarrass and shame companies to cut their DEI departments. Although I will point out, the Electoral College is the ultimate DEI program. Yeah, I think finding a group that is thinking about, people can talk about leading with empathy and trust and, what is the culture? And if you are agile, you are doing rituals and norms, and those rituals and norms become cultural. And so if your cultural norms can be rooted in the peace model, then you can then change your organization to be the place of driving innovation, driving collaboration.
Sweet. Thanks, Maggie. Alex, thanks for
Yes.
walking us through this. This is really insightful. Loved it. I have a question. which is more on lines of what your experience has been using the peace model. Like, what kind of organizations have you introduced this to, and what kind of feedback have you received, and what are some of the learnings that you could share with everybody?
Well, I gave you this example of this survey, and this is something from this year. So, I now do this quarterly. So this is a breakdown. In fact, this analyst I work with, he was so excited, like he just went down to Dallas to do a workshop, and we did a whole change impact assessment using the PEACE model. And so he spent 15 minutes walking a bunch of digital programmers and designers through this, and they're like, okay, got it. And they got to understand the peace model, and then we did some questions based on peace to do it. But like, this is exactly my work from this year. Like, this is a lift and shift from that. So you don't really say neuroscience. So like, you just say like, hey, I got a tool that's pretty precise. This is going to give you precision. What if I could tell you in 5 questions, I can be pretty confident what people care about? People don't care what that is. They want that. Like, show them what the outcome is. And so if you say like, I got this big neuroscience model, it's like, oh, it sounds like someone wrote a book. I don't know if I want to hear that. So
Yeah.
how you frame it up, which is why the conversation starters, I think, are pretty key. So how is it that you can feel that you can ask these questions to get people curious? So the thing, going back to this, don't show up with a solution. Establish that there's a problem. You got to establish that there's a hole before you can fill the hole. If you show up with your solution, you're now piling dirt on a bunch of grass, and people are like, well, there's no hole here. You haven't established that there's a hole. Case in point, when was this? 2017? 2017, I was rolling out a SharePoint site, which seems crazy because Teams was sort of new. And the resistance to a SharePoint site was unbelievable. And what the leaders had done was protect their team. There's this whole procurement team of about 80 people who had 60,000 documents, 300,000 documents in 60,000 folders. And when it came time to find a contract, they couldn't find it. Leaders would spend all weekend trying to find this contract because, it had to be renewed. They had to look at the terms, the legal wanted to see it. And the people did not realize that their filing system digitally was crap. And so they said, we need a SharePoint site so we can tag and search for every document. And all the procurement people like, we don't need that at all. Like, we're fine. Our system, we've been working and refining the system for a year. We know exactly what it is. So then I went to a focus group of the 5 latest new hires who admitted that they were totally lost. The people who had built the system did not see that there was a hole. They did not see that there was a gap that needed to be filled. And so I would just say, establish and confront the reality of what the problem is, and then say, maybe I have something that could actually fill this, and not only fill it, but like seal it so you never have this issue again. That would be a way to introduce it. How you tee that up will be very key. Definitely don't say neuroscience, because that will just walk you out of the room. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I just need a tool that's going to work. And that's what people don't want. They want a solution, but definitely establish that there's a hole. Did I touch on the question?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about this. So it does always come down to the culture of the organization, though, right? So from the top.
Yeah, it's and the culture is also the personalities. Like, what is this group doing? Like right now, I got this guy who's, he's running in 1,000 different directions. He's got 1,000 clients screaming for his head and trying to get him to do a town hall. But once I did the survey and saw the feedback, I said, hey, Jimmy, we got this feedback. If you have these 5 talking points, when we do the survey next month, I guarantee you the scores will go up. And suddenly, I wasn't really encouraged to talk to the sponsor on calls. And suddenly I was like, oh, and Alex has some sentiment analysis he wants to share about how things are improving. Alex, take it away. And I'm like, last month, people felt this way. This month, they felt this way. Here's a percentage. People like, oh, this is very interesting. Okay, great. More. And so someone was like, hey, Alex, we need more of that sentiment analysis. I'm like, well, you wouldn't let us do a survey last month, so we don't have anything. Oh, crap. What do you got? And so I was like, so we would mine teams for engagement and like, oh, we did a post here and we got this many responses. Like, people want the data. By the way, nobody ever wants a survey, but everybody wants results.
Yeah, that's true.
So figure out a way to entice them to do it. And so to me, I did a pulse check, and originally we had just said that we were going to do these 3 questions at top, which is my typical summary one. How are things going on a scale 1 to 5? What gives you confidence? What gives you doubt? That's something I would do with your own internal Agile project Scrum team on a bi-weekly basis, because it gives people a forum to actually complain, because everyone has to keep it positive about opportunities and things are going great. No one's ever allowed to actually constructively bitch.
Sweet. Thanks so much. And
Sure.
sorry, could you repeat what book you earlier shared?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
It's The Neuroscience of Organizational Change
I put a
by
link
Hilary
in the
Scarlett.
chat too.
Yeah, it's great. Like I got a bunch of David Rock books. His books are fine. But Hilary Scarlett, she just writes in a way that really spoke to me, and I devoured it in the summer of like 2018. I probably read it 3 times, highlighting it back and forth. I'm like, this is really great. I'm like, the spaces model, it's so good, but it's not, it didn't quite resonate with me. And the scarf model, which I liked, there was also sort of missing something. And the more I dug around, I saw that, there's like a dozen of these things, and they all have variations of scarf, but I felt like, leading with purpose and leading with why, start with why, like that whole thing was just like, it kept gnawing at me. And so I said, am I that arrogant where I'm going to build my own framework? Like, who the hell am I? I'm nobody. Like, I'm not a person, but I had done enough research in the past since 2014 that like this was something that I couldn't shake. And I was like, all right, well, let's put together and roll with it. And it's been really useful. And by the way, the Neuro Leadership Institute, who owns the SCARF model, they're very litigious. So one group tried to use it in a company, and someone found out, and they got a legal wrangling. So be mindful if anybody has a trademark on it, similar like with AdCard. If they find out you're using it without licensing it, they will go after you. I've seen the
Got it.
letters.
Thanks, Alex.
Sure.
Still got time for some more questions. Now's your chance.
So let me ask you this. Tomorrow you go to work. It's a Friday. Usually not a good idea to introduce stuff Friday. Next week, it's Monday. Maybe you have Monday off, Wednesday, but whenever you start your next productive day, Monday or Tuesday, what from this might be appealing to you? How might you bring this to your job? How can this be a shortcut for you?
Get 2 hands raised. Who wants to go
All right,
first?
go for it. I can't see it, so go for it.
Oh, Joanne, you haven't spoken yet. Go ahead.
So I can't answer that question. Unfortunately, I'm between jobs, but I am expecting to be joining an organization that's going through some change in their PMO right now. My question actually was about getting people to actually complete those surveys. The company that I used to work for, they would talk a lot about the safe space
Oh
to
yeah,
give
the
your
big lie.
feedback, right?
Yeah, for sure. Always
And then there was
not
tremendous
buying that one.
backlash.
Yeah.
Oh, everything's anonymous, but everything was not anonymous, and there was definitely backlash. How can you convince companies not to act that way?
Yeah, and companies are the biggest hypocrites. They'll do everything they can to undermine it. I'm always friends with the HR people, and as I point out to people, HR is to keep the CEO out of jail. They're not there for the employees. The one thing that I do is to prove to them that it's anonymous. And I usually create stuff in Microsoft Forms, and Forms obviously you can make it where it's a single sign-on, so you can track their email. But if you're not doing that, if you're making anonymous, then what you do is you take the survey like 7 times, and then you take the spreadsheet that shows the columns of anonymous and say, when we run the results, they're going to look like this. We can't see anything other than this. And so what happens is, like, we actually did the survey in February. We got some decent results, but you can tell that they were artificially high because everyone's saying nice things. And then when they saw that it was truly anonymous and that we truly were acting on it, the next survey actually went down. It was a true change curve. Like, oh, the first one is uninformed optimism. Second one was like, oh, this is real anonymous. Okay, got it. Then I will give you the dirt. But it took a trust factor to do it. I would also say that we did a lot of work engaging people on teams. So we went full community manager. We had Monday, Wednesday, Friday engagements of like, what's your Monday? What'd you do this weekend? Wednesday, what are you looking forward to? You know, Friday, it's, you know, what's a word that you would use to describe this week, looking back on it. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we had different prompts to build that sort of engagement. And like, we are here to hear from you. And like, hey, how's it going? What could be better? And like, you know, they didn't know me. I was a total stranger to them. And I had to do a lot to build trust with teams. And so then when I dropped a survey on them, again, first one was like, I don't know if I trust this guy. And then when they saw that this is actually looking to move the needle, and then when in May, when I got their boss to admit like we have no planned layoffs, the next survey was like probably a little bit more negative because like, okay, they will take action on this feedback that's anonymous. Great. And the sad part is I liked visible. I like it when people are accountable to survey results so they can't take shots. So what I don't know is how many people are stuffing the ballot box.
Right.
But
I've seen that situation as well.
yeah.
Right.
And
Thank
you can
you.
see it because sometimes you'll look and you'll see like, oh, wow, we got 7 responses at 6:36 p.m. on a, you know, Monday.
Well, that's like the very obvious HR reviews on Glassdoor, which Maggie, your question, that's where I would go look to see what a company's culture is like. That's been really valuable for me in my job search.
Yeah, I have used Glassdoor as well. Yeah. Yeah, I was
I
sort of
used to-
being I was sort of being facetious when I was asking that.
I figured, but still, I figured I'd say it out loud.
I always look at every company and I'll say like company lawsuit. I'll look at that with certain people too. Like, does a person have any lawsuits against them? And so like, if the company has any lawsuits, it's like, okay, what was the nature of that? And like, where's their head at with regards to how they treat people? Because maybe they're gun shy from they got bit from somebody who, you know, came after them or something. And
Yeah.
so
Oh,
why does the company be?
one of my CEOs went
That's
to
a good
jail,
point.
so that was great.
I've not been in that situation, thankfully.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you,
So
Alex.
yeah, surveys are hard, but I would also talk to them about like, you know, here's a way that we could do that. Like if we do this, like, you know, use AI, use ChatGPT or something to kind of say like, if I were to ask these questions, what would it help me do? And then sort of tell them like, you know, give a free sample of like what that looks like. And so
Good
like,
tip.
this is, if we know this, then we can give you more certainty, then we can help you with this. Like, you know, we don't know what all of the blind spots are that you care about. Like, so it will help us. I always tell people surveys help us identify the bright spots and amplify the blind spots. Because right now, what might be obvious to you is not obvious to the leaders.
Right. Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah, surveys are hard. And by the way, the job market's hard. Good luck. Keep networking, and also it's an algorithm. So if for last year when I got laid off, I posted something on LinkedIn based on my, you know, conversations with recruiters. Refresh your LinkedIn profile every 3 weeks. Set a timer on your calendar, refresh it because it's looking for fresh meat. And if you refresh it, you look like a new candidate, and suddenly that will elevate you versus same old, same old. So
Yeah,
keep
and bring the
tweaking it.
bots
It's great
as well.
advice. Thanks. We got
Good
time
And
for
tip.
I mean,
another.
literally,
Thank you.
the job I got at Kraft Foods was because I worked at a university where we had a master's program in procurement. And when they searched LinkedIn for procurement, social media, leadership, communications, I was like the purple unicorn that popped up in Chicago. And I got a call from a recruiter from New Jersey that I almost hung up on. She's like, do you want to do change management at Kraft? I'm like, sure. I totally thought it was a spam call. They interviewed me. I had an interview. I was like, I mean, literally, you can tell them that those were the words that they chose. Because I asked them later how they found me, and that's what the recruiter said.
Interesting. I'm finding that networking is the key. Get yourself out there and be bold.
Be bold and be quick. I also have seen like, you know, job posted, it's been open for 4 days. You go to apply, oh, it's closed. If you don't apply within the first 48 hours, they're never going to see it.
That is very true. All right, I will concede the floor. I think Darlene had a question.
Darlene, you still got one? Or-
Yeah, my question was, so does this have a trademark? You said that scarf was litigious.
Yeah, not yet. Well, I'm probably going to copyright it, but in terms of like sharing it with folks, nothing's weirder than like, oh, this is a great idea. Oh, I can't use it. Like, so yeah, no, this will be like, I guess open source would be the way to do it. And so like, I don't know how I could protect it so it's mine, so nobody else can trademark it and take it over from me. Like, so that's kind of where I'm at. Like, yeah, I would probably have a thing of, it'd be copyrighted that I own it, but that other people could use it.
By the way, I thought that it was so interesting, the little bit that you told about how you developed this, how you came about it. It was really
Yeah, thanks.
interesting.
No,
I'd
it
like
was
to hear
really
more.
okay. I'm a big believer in like respecting research that's out there. Like, oh, let's amplify stuff. Don't reinvent a wheel. I'm a big believer in getting an axle and getting mileage out of the existing wheels. And like the other stuff was like, it's there. It just didn't resonate. I was like, I just wasn't there. And then I was like playing around with it. I'm like, am I not brash enough to have my own thing? And then the more I sort of talked it around to people, like, oh yeah, you definitely got to start with purpose. Like that was such a head nodding affirmation for me. And then it's like, oh, these are other scarf versions of it. They said, but it gives you this positive thing that's not just about protection and risk. And so like the more I heard that feedback, it also emboldened me to like, maybe I got something here.
And it's really nice that it's named Peace. It's just a beautiful
That's the
name.
other that's the other thing. Like, I actually did a workshop for this and I didn't want to get snarky or, show I didn't want to think that I was petty or whatever. I was trying to just be clever and hook people in. Like, I did a thing called Hold On, AdCar, you forgot your scarf. Like, how do you bridge change methodologies together? It's like, all right, I don't want to look like I'm knocking them, but it's a matter of like scarf is a weird thing. And AdCar, I'll tell you, I'll never forget the first time I heard AdCar. I'm like, that is the worst acronym I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, okay, yeah, it might all work, but it was like, yikes, it doesn't sink in. It's not an elegant framework. So in terms of and spaces is fine. So, but yeah, it's just a lot to consume. Like I kept trying to hone it down, like what could be faster and easier than pace. And like CARES is a model that's out there. It's like a reorganization of scarf. So, you can search, it's like a dozen of them. But a lot of them are they're risk oriented.
Yeah, I think I heard of CARES, but I would have to look that up. uh, And Scarf is really the only one that I had heard of before. I'm kind of new to.
Yeah, David Rock does a great job. He's a great storyteller. I've learned a lot from him. I do think that he's great at marketing, right? He's a really good, storyteller with that. But in terms of like, how do you make things more accessible to folks, like in terms of bringing it to the masses? By the way, if you ever want to see, what I think his best work is actually as good as the Scarf model is. Look up Microsoft's leadership development program. It's basically 6 words. They have 3 2-word phrases, and I think it's actually probably the best, most elegant work that they've done. And Microsoft has really transformed with that. And so when I was at the conference in 2017, there was probably 20 Microsoft people I was talking about. They were all excited about that. So anyway, the Microsoft Leadership Development Program done with David Rock, you can read some stuff about that. It's really good.
Hey guys,
I hope
go ahead.
if anyone else, I just want, I'm not assuming that there's no linear, one thing happens first and the second. It's the acronym can happen in any order. It's just
Yeah.
the items.
The one thing I don't have on this slide is that like each of them are on a bar and there's a continuum. And so while you can have like tonight, we're all here with a shared purpose, but maybe our ego is different because like I don't get to speak or I don't get to share what I'm knowing, or a time I'm not making decisions here. Maggie invited this weirdo. Like all these things, like you're vacillating on all these. So you might have a low sense of equality, you might have a high sense of purpose, like those things change on a fluid scale.
Thank you.